Welcome, everyone. Thank you for attending today's webinar, SEL Blueframe, a secure application platform designed for operational technology systems. My name is Tristan Beaudois. I'm a program coordinator from Pullman, Washington, and I'll be today's moderator. Before we start, I'd like to bring a few items to your attention. This is an audio-only broadcast, and all participants are muted. The webinar will be an hour long, including questions at the end of the presentation, and there will be a recording available on our website shortly after. If you have any questions during the presentation, please submit them to all panelists with the Q&A tool at the bottom right-hand corner of the application. Any questions that are not addressed during the live event will be answered by our experts via email. Also, we will be offering PDH credits for participating in today's live events. To receive PDH credits, you must attend at least 75% of the webinar, and no partial credits will be awarded. After the webinar, you'll receive a certificate for your credits via email. Our presenter today is David Prestwich, and we also have Engineering Director Mark Weber and Automation Engineer Christian Howdigi joining us today to help answer questions during the presentation. David received his bachelor's in mathematics from the University of Idaho in 1999. He has been a product engineer and development manager for multiple software groups at SEL for the past 15 years and has led several projects that touch a wide variety of SEL products. Prior to joining SEL, he worked as an automation engineer implementing control systems around the world. Now, I'll pass the microphone to David, and we can get started.
All right, thank you, Tristan, for that introduction. And we're excited to show everybody here some of the new stuff that SEL's automation group has been working on for the last couple of years and now has released this year in 2021. We'll talk about a wide variety of topics throughout the day, and we hope to get a lot of questions and be able to answer those on the spot. I certainly want to thank both Christian and Mark for helping me out today as they receive questions and be able to answer. And we're looking forward to showing off what we've built, as well as some of the applications we feel like we're going to be able to solve. With that, let's go ahead and present the slides and present SEL Blueframe. One of the things when we built the Blueframe platform in automation, we certainly wanted to take a look at things that we've done well in the past, and that includes certainly the SEL RTAC, the automation projects, the products like Team, the Axion, and the 2411. We certainly wanted to take advantage of the work that we've done in those products, but at the same time be able to really take a step back and make sure that we're solving problems that you guys are seeing in the field. And when we looked at kind of that problem space, we really started to identify what we consider some challenges that the industry faces today. One of the first one is simply just systems are becoming more complex. I mean, there's no denying that when it came to what we considered complex 20 years ago, doesn't even quite scale to what we're seeing today. And that includes anything from multiple IT type requirements, VPNs, user credentials, and just simply put, like the number of devices that are now in the system that are communicating up to either SCADA or to your central office just creates that challenge that we see today. In addition to just the sheer size and the amount of devices that we as an industry need to support, we certainly also recognize that the type of IT requirements, be it system logs to LDAP integration to certificate management, we wanted to make sure that we could also solve that so that Blueframe could scale not just to the individual device that might be sitting at your desk, but really scale at that corporate level where we can go out and manage anywhere from 500 to 15,000 or 20,000 devices at any given time. And then finally, we also wanted to make sure that, when it comes to the hardware applications that Blueframe works on, we wanted to make sure that that hardware and the software work together, not only in conjunction with how the software performs, but at the same time allow you, the end user, to be able to scale and change out systems as quick as possible. So when it came to the hardware and the Blueframe OS, we really wanted to not just simply throw out and say, here's a new piece of hardware for you guys to put in the substation, but we also took a step back and wanted to make sure that we could reduce the number of assets, the number of devices that you have in the station at the same time. And so A lot of our customers from SEL still continue to, just based out of necessity, have data collections or data concentrators that are still running on Windows operating system, and we certainly wanted to get that outside of that OT network. And you can see here on this slide where, traditionally you might have that extra computer in that station, and one of the goals of that Blueframe platform, as well as the DMA software, which I'll talk about here in a bit, is to kind of reduce that level in the station so that you can remove the needs to have virus scanning, remove the needs to have updates, Windows patches, and really allow Blueframe to sit in that station and be your anything from data collector to event collection to even being a simple kiosk that lets you go up and connect up to devices in that station. So kind of in that background, or at least with that background in mind, and the problem space we were trying to solve over a number of years of development, SEL is proud to announce that we have what we call the SEL Blueframe application platform. Now, this is produced in our automation group and is supported by the same guys who have had that successful and what we consider a great product, the SEL RTAC and the Axion. The Blueframe platform is an embedded modular OT system that allows you to really scale both the applications from the substation to the corporate server. So let's dive into that a little bit and kind of show you what we mean by what the Blueframe platform does. So we kind of treat this application ecosystem really in three different layers, and the bottom layer is certainly our hardware, right? The 3355 computer, 3360, and now we have also, for those of you who may not know, we have the SEL 3350, which is a 1U device that allows you to, fit those form factors that you're used to, say that the 3355 may not be applicable to, or you may not need that much horsepower. But that's our starting layer. That's what we consider our foundation, is working with the SEL automation controllers. The next layer is what we consider the platform. The platform is just simply that. It's the OS. It's the OS that's secured down. It's the one that you need to install with the hardware and allows for those applications to be installed and be modular. The third tier is what we call that applications and tools. And so what we like to give the analogy, it's the way Blueframe is set up is it's really set up very similar to the way you're purchasing a cell phone today. So for example, if I was to go out and want to get a new iPhone or an Android phone, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to first select the hardware that is applicable to what I want, right? The screen size, maybe the battery life, the processor. And once I've chosen that phone, the next thing I'm going to get is the OS that comes along with it. That may be the Android OS or it may be the iPhone OS. And when you first unbox that phone, it's going to come preloaded with a certain set of applications. An example for your iPhone, maybe it has iMessaging, it might have an email application and a web browser. The Blueframe platform is very similar to that. You as a user can select your hardware type. Once you've defined that hardware type based on your needs and order the Blueframe platform with it, it's going to come preloaded with a certain set of management tools already installed on it. And we'll go over those here a little bit more in just a minute. But once you have at least got that initial setup done, at that point, it's really up to you, the end user, to decide which applications you want to install on top of that. So that's a good way to think about that Blueframe platform, is how it scales that way on those three tiers. All right, so let's dive in a little bit into what's included in kind of those standard, or we call standard management tools. So the first thing is obviously we have some type of user management. We've got security logs, being able to authenticate off of a central server, say LDAP, defining your certificates. And obviously, we also have what we call the application management. Application management, again, going back to that cell phone example, it's very similar to your App Store on the iPhone or the Google Store or Android Store for your Android phone. This is where you would begin to select the packages you want and apply it to the application that you are trying to define with Blueframe. In addition to just those base applications that Blueframe comes with, one of the things we wanted to make sure that we solved with this platform was the ability to really scale in relation to credentials and user roles. And so what we mean by that is this is not one of those applications that simply has a single user account associated with it. You as an administrator of a Blueframe system can really scale which roles are applicable, what roles those have access to, and integrate that with your own authentication server. And of course, all of those then are logged, that information is logged and can be pushed and moved out based on your requirements. So I kind of mentioned this a little bit earlier, but here is actually a screenshot of the user management within Blueframe. And you can see there on the left there, you as an administrator can define those roles. And then once those roles have been created, then it's just a matter of associating any number of members to it. Later on, I'll actually do a quick little demonstration of the software and walk through that. But the example we give often is you may want your automation engineers or your protection engineers to only have access to certain applications in Blueframe, and the software over there on the right, you can see grants that access to the individual role. So quite a bit of flexibility there, in our opinion, and something we're actually pretty excited about. From a security standpoint, if you guys are like me, it's always one of those things where it's kind of nice and fun to talk about security, but there's so much complexity that comes along with that ride. We really feel like we've given a pretty happy medium here when it comes to defining those roles and those accounts inside the Blueframe platform. It scales well for giving multiple groups access to a potential single server. At the same time, earlier I mentioned about the Blueframe software comes with a certain set of applications that are just built into the system. But once you've got that system set up, you'll want to add the applications that SCL produces. And one of the first application suites that we'll produce and released is called DMA, and I'll get into that here in a little bit. But the point behind this slide is really just to show you that you have a couple of things that you can do when it comes to managing applications inside Blueframe. One is simply just to install and upload packages, and the other one is to help manage the versions that are installed on that application server. A couple of things just to note is everything when it comes to those packages does not require internet connectivity. The packages can be downloaded or sent or shipped to you guys direct and then loaded up onto your own PC and scanned. They're all signed packages from SCL. And when the installation goes inside of Blueframe, no internet connectivity is required. So that's something to just be aware of. This isn't something that we would expect to be connected to the internet at all. But it does still have that flexibility to install those applications individually. A few other things that are kind of unique to the system, in our opinion, is that the applications can be both upgraded and downgraded. And so the use case we give often for that is, take, for example, let's say you've baselined your application versions. You're happy with that. They've been out in the substation and running for a number of months. And SCL comes out with a new feature that you'd want to test out. What this upgrade and downgrade feature that you can see there on the right allows you to do is either in your lab environment or even potentially even in the station during some type of testing, you're allowed to install a newer application version, test it out, document what you like and what you want, and then at the end of that testing, you can actually, depending on your requirements, you can actually revert back to the older version and leave things as is. So again, it's kind of a small little feature when it comes to the application management, but something that we think is pretty cool and a little bit unique in the industry that allows you to kind of both roll up and roll back when it comes to working with those applications. Once those applications have been installed, Blueframe really has what we kind of call this kind of common platform architecture. And you can think of it like this, is once an application is inside that ecosystem of Blueframe, the data can be shared across those applications. So you can see down there at the bottom, it's kind of got this application set, generic kind of A, B, and C. And really what we want you to be aware of is that rather than having each of those applications be independent, Blueframe really allows those applications to work together. And so if you've defined a resource inside Blueframe, that resource then is available to any application. So going back again to that iPhone example, once you've created your contacts in your phone, those contacts should be available to any application that may require it. It's very similar in Blueframe. We want to share that information inside of that ecosystem. So let's get into a little bit more on some of the applications that we've produced at SCL, as well as kind of give you a little bit of an insight on the roadmap that we have through this year and into next. So we've mentioned the management tools that come pre-installed with Blueframe, like account management and application management, or setting, say, your IP address on that Blueframe platform. The first suite of applications is DMA, which I'll go into details. But at the same time, we feel like this really opens up the world to us when it comes to new applications beyond just the DMA that's released today. Anything from being able to manage credentials to beginning to add additional traditional protocols like SCADA protocols. We want to be able to apply that to this Blueframe platform and make that so that those applications are not only independent, but can be released quickly and get in the hands of you, the customer, as fast as possible. When it comes to those applications, this slide here is a little bit kind of detailed from a standpoint of how we've built up these application containers. I think the takeaway for you guys in the audience is simply this, is each of the applications that can be installed Blueframe can come from SCL, but those applications can really be developed independently. And what that means to you, the end user, is you should have quicker updates, quicker releases of features, and an independence across those applications where you don't have to rely on one side of the platform in order to wait for another side to be changed. A pretty strong example here is, for those of you guys who are familiar with Accelerator QuickSet, or even the RTAC firmware, at times, right, we have to release things all at once and get those into your hands, and that can be a pretty extensive process when it comes to just that single firmware file or the single setup file in QuickSet. What we're trying to solve here is kind of keep those containers, those applications, quite a bit more independent. And what that means to you is that you get the updates you want rather than an entire monolithic file that has to be looked into. So let's get into our first suite of applications that SCL has released on this Blueframe platform. This will be a little bit, for those of you guys who are familiar with Accelerator QuickSet and the Accelerator Team platform, there will be some overlap here, but also a lot of advantages that we feel we've put into the software. So the first suite is what we call Data Management and Automation, or abbreviated as DMA. As you start to look at the software, you'll notice that it'll have a green little D icon next to each of those applications. And when it comes to that DMA, its main goal is to simply do that. It's simply to manage data from that substation. And when we talk about the data in this instance, I'll go into detail here in a few seconds, but you can really think of it as kind of non-traditional SCADA or non-SCADA data that we are pulling off of those devices from an asset management point of view. As of today, we've released two main feature sets for DMA. One is called disturbance monitoring. Another one's configuration monitoring. And then we have a couple of extra additional diagnostics and API tools that we've built into this. Again, using the team software as an example, in the past, when we build a lot of the automation products, we kind of felt like we had to pull all that information in and kind of own it. One of the things that's unique with DMA is we've built it so that it's a system that can archive information but really be shared across your organization, which I'll go into on that REST API. So that first application is what we call that disturbance monitoring and disturbance monitoring archive data. And its main goal is to do something we've been doing for a long time at SEL. From the first relay that was able to generate an event, one of the first things we had to find and solve was pull that data off of those relays. And so disturbance monitoring really focuses in on collecting that SOE, sequence of event information, or SER data off the relays, and aggregating those to meet both your auditing and diagnostics requirements. And it also collects the event files off of the relays as well, the SEL relays, so both the COM trades and the compressed event files. Not only does it collect that data, but it archives it off into a very open system that you can view all through the convenience of a web browser. That is one thing I actually forgot to mention earlier on is when it comes to that Blueframe portal and the Blueframe platform, it is configured exclusively through a web browser. And so what that means is you no longer have to worry when you're working with these tools and applications about making sure your remote client desktop or laptop has the right version. Everything can be done through the web page so long as you have access to that server, to the web browser, I mean. From there, what DMA, just to go into a little bit more information, is, again, I mentioned that it gathers the oscillography and SOE information. One advantage we feel like we have is for those users out in the field who already have RTACs in the station, you can really take advantage of the RTAC doing what we kind of call doing a little bit of the dirty work in the station. So it can go out and collect, the RTAC can collect the SER and the event files. And then what it has the ability to do is the RTAC can then publish or notify Blueframe and say, I've got new events, come and collect them. And so that does a couple of things. One, it can help you isolate your firewall rules. And at the same time, it also allows you to collect those events only on demand or when they actually occur rather than setting up a polling interval and increasing the amount of bandwidth or data that's going across your network. In addition to collecting those SOE, we've been able to put that information into a standardized format that's not only accessible via just simply the web browser, but it's also accessible through what we call our public APIs. We have a REST interface that's in place for all of that data that we pull in with DMA. And what that really means for you guys in the field is when you want to begin to integrate your own tool sets with DMA, it's quite a bit easier than having two separate databases that have two separate types of information. Our goal there is to make it as simple as possible for you to pull information out of the DMA archive and get it integrated with other systems. Examples might be your own settings management. You may have your own historian for archiving off ComTrade files, or you may just simply have your own file shares and network drives that you want that data to be or require that data to be in. So that REST API gives you quite a bit of flexibility as far as both looking at the data as well as moving it around long term. So one of the many things that we focused in on when we built this Blueframe platform was to make sure that the usability was far and away some of the best, or we feel like is some of the best software SEL's produced over the years. And when it comes to those event collection, those data collection jobs for that DMA is required to do, go out and collect oscillography or go out and collect SOE, we wanted that to be as quick as feasible. And again, using the example of the older team software, DMA is really kind of flip things around, and it allows you, the user, to quickly create a new plan and then associate any number of devices at a time. And to give you a couple of examples, we have, a few customers already using the software, and they're able to create plans from anything as small as maybe monitoring, 5 to 10 RTACs in the field to, 1,000 to 2,500 reclosers. And they're able to do that through this configuration monitoring, this disturbance monitoring plans. Once that data has been collected, you as a user then can simply generate any kind of number of reports. Those reports are basically a way to look at the event data as well as the SCR. I'll actually do a demonstration of this later on, so I'll skip through this part. Another advantage that we've released is what we're calling configuration monitoring, and this has probably been the #1 question that myself, Christian, and Mark have been getting asked over the last year. Is, how do I manage all of my assets out in the field? And we say managed in that context, we're talking about how do I know what firmware my devices have the settings changed over this interval? And those two questions are really what configuration monitoring is set to try to solve for you. So not only does it collect the configuration data, the settings from the relays, it also archives those off, it baselines them, and allows you, the end user, to generate those reports that are required to either, one, verify that firmware in the field is what you'd expect, and or simply take a look at your assets when maybe cross-referencing that to a new firmware that's been released and the features that it has. So here's an example of Blueframe's DMA software working with, say, a data concentrator. In this example, I've got a data concentrator, but you certainly could have the same thing when it comes to an IED. But what you'll see is Blueframe will go out and ask that data concentrator a pretty simple question, right? It's going to say, can you tell me, what are your settings, or what is your firmware version? And it's going to do that based on that interval you've defined. That may be once a week, that may be once a month. It's really up to you. And then once that data's been done, every time DMA goes and collects from those devices, it's going to really do a cross-check and say, has anything changed since the last time I collected this information and baselined it? And so what you can see here is this is kind of a generic example, but as it finds differences, the software will do a couple of things. It'll, one, tell you what's changed based on the device and give you those date references. And in addition, not only will it tell you that it's changed, but you, the user, through that convenience of that web browser, can then download those settings and take a look at them direct. So something we're pretty excited about. It feels like it allows you, the end users, to really support those devices out in the field when it comes to SEL products. For those of you guys who are already using our SEL gateways, the 3620s and 3610s, coming this summer, we'll be adding another application to the DMA suites, which we're calling credential management. And really what credential management is focusing in on is supporting those 3620s that are in the field and getting that information off of them so that you can aggregate that data at that corporate level. Again, this is going to be releasing this summer. It'll have a very similar feel to that, the disturbance monitoring and the configuration monitoring applications. But if you can look over here to the right of this little simplified screen, the whole goal of that DMA credential management when it comes to working with our SEL 3620s, 3622s is very similar to the settings monitoring. It's going to go ask and either tell the 3620 to change or rotate passwords. Once the 3620 has completed that, we will then go grab those reports, all of the proxy reports that are on that device, and not only store them off, but we'll also actually parse them out so it'll be accessible through the password, and that data information will be accessible. So something to look forward this summer as we release that product. Finally, when it comes to Blueframe and DMA, it's inevitable to know once you start adding that many devices into a system, either at the substation level or at the corporate level, it's inevitable that you will begin to have some, anomalies or failures to connect to those devices. And so we wanted to make sure we solve that with DMA, and so we've added a pretty extensive level of diagnostics to the software. And you can think of diagnostics really as, how has my system been running over this last month? Where are my connections maybe failing? Where are my connections good? Why are the connections failing? Is it because we've got a network outage? Or is it because we're using potentially a bad password, or we have yet to update passwords? The whole point behind diagnostics when it comes to this DMA application suite is to simply give you an extra layer or extra look into the overall system and really be able to identify the health of it without waiting on the events to be collected or the settings to be collected. So again, we hope you're not in this diagnostics very often, but we also know that, networks can be difficult to manage. Things can go wrong, things can change. And when you're collecting that amount of data on a 24/7 interval, it's inevitable that something will at times fail, and we hope that we give you as much diagnostics information as possible to really troubleshoot those issues. Kind of summarizing the Blueframe and the DMA software here before I get into the actual software demo is there's just a few examples there on the bottom. You can see that DMA can obviously run up at the corporate side. I referenced that it certainly runs on the SEL computing platform hardware. We also are beginning to just finalize aspects of Blueframe being able to run up at that, what we call that virtual environment, or that virtual server environment. So you can think of that as a lot of your IT infrastructures already have a larger VMware server or vSphere server, and that's going to be available in Blueframe. But it also has those same applications where Blueframe can also be installed in the substation on our SEL hardware, like the 3355. A reminder that it is a secure operating system. We treat it just like our RTAC operating system, where everything is whitelisted. There is no virus scanning software. You should expect that Blueframe operating system and platform to be just as secure as any other SEL product that's inside that substation. So with that, we'll get to the ever exciting part of doing a quick little demonstration of the Blueframe platform. And I'll also kind of catch my breath here and see if there's any outstanding questions that Mark or Christian would like me to go over real quick, and or at least prepare for those questions and answer part. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here for just a second. All right, so I'll be remote desktop into my computer here for just a minute, based on kind of where I'm demonstrating here. But here's the actual Blueframe operating system. So you can notice here, I'm just running a traditional Windows desktop. This is my own desktop here at work. I've opened up the Chrome browser, and I'm able to go to an IP address that's on this network. So I'm going to go ahead and log in. And once I've logged in, again, from that browser, I now have access to those applications. I've obviously already installed a few of the applications on the system, so I've already got DMA. You can see these tiles here. So I, as a user, can do quite a bit. Everything is tied to those own user accounts. So if I want to come in and change, say, the theme as my user account to a dark theme, I can do that if you want. I can add favorites. So as we start to add more and more applications, we're assuming that these tiles will become more and more, potentially add more and more tiles across that screen. And so I can come in and add to my favorites and then simplify that overall screen. You'll notice that I've got my account management. So here's where I would go in and define my accounts and roles. For this server here, I've at least defined a couple of roles, engineering and operators. And so if I go back to my navigation and come back to my main landing screen, you'll notice that if I was to log out, so here's kind of a way to show how that works is, right now I'm logged on as an administrator. If I was to log out, and log on as an engineer with the engineering role, you'll notice the minute I've logged in, right, I no longer have access to all those system settings. I can't look at the log information, but I do have access to, the applications that have been granted to me based on permissions. And so kind of a fun example that we talk about often is, again, your engineers may want access to being able to define the resources, to be finding the devices, but your operators, you may only want them to look at the archive data that's been collected. Again, I won't have the time to go through all of these applications, but a couple of things I want you to be aware of is that one of the main and first applications that you would use is what we call this resource management. Now, you can think of this very similar to the device manager inside of the Accelerator QuickSet. But in short, what you as a user can do is define your folders, your resources. We have a global search up here. And then those devices then, not only the device names and attributes are defined here, but you as an end user can also get pretty flexible and start to build up those applications and labels as well. So for example, I may come in as a user and say, I need to look at all of my 421 devices, and you can build up that filter. And on top of that, I might even go one step further and say, show me any of the devices that are applied to that have a label NERT. And so right now it's not showing anything. So if I remove that, I've pre-set up a few devices here on this network where I've said my 451 has the label NERT. And that's just simply a way of kind of hashtagging or assigning an extra additional attribute so that you can search. Once you've built up those searches and those filters, then you can will be able to save those off as we add to this functionality. You can also simply just double click on a single device, rename it, change some of the attributes that are required, and in addition, build up your communication paths as far as how you connect up to those devices and what their credentials are. So once you have those resources defined, at that point, really it comes down to building up your DMA configuration plans to collect that oscillography and that settings information. And for this example, so we have enough time for Q&A, what I'll do is just quickly kind of show you how the disturbance monitoring archive feature set works. So the example here would be, I want to create a report to know what type of event data has been collected for a few of my devices. So I know I've got a 651R that I've at least got a little bit of data on, and I think I've also got, let's see here, I know I've got a 3555 RTAC with my last name that I've got some data. And I've even got, let me see, I've got this 751 device. So what we're doing here, and this is very similar to the settings management stuff, is we treat these as reports, right? So we say, these are the devices that I want to generate the report. I want that report to show all of the data that we've collected for, say, the last 6 months. And I want to show both SOE and oscillography. So I'll go ahead and generate that. And at this point, I've got all that functionality as far as being able to do a search. So if I want to look at all my SOE data where it says settings have changed, I can look at that information. Or if I want to look at an element, again, this is just kind of data that I've triggered inside my own lab. But what gets really nice, right, is not only do I have that information that I can search, but I can select on one of those individual items inside the browser. And you can see off here to the right, I can download the event types that we've collected off that relay, so compressed, filtered, or unfiltered. We also convert any ComTrade. Most of our relays support ComTrade 1999, but we also will convert that to ComTrade 2013 based on your standard. So I can download those events. But one extra thing when I mentioned those different applications that we've got is you can see off here to the right, not only can I download it, but I can also select an event type and we've built inside, so if I click on this compressed unfiltered, we've built inside of the Blueframe DMA what we call a Syncrowave Event Express. So it's built from the same group that you guys are used to for the Syncrowave Event Viewer. It just is what we call kind of an express version inside this browser, where you can at least start to look at the settings and the event data right there in the convenience of from your desk without having to open up any number of applications. Again, this is just a triggered event, so it doesn't look that great, but you get the general idea of how that should work. All right, with that, we'll kind of open it up for a question and answer section. I know it looks like we've got a few questions that have been coming in.
Thank you, David. Now that we've arrived at the Q&A portion, I just want to remind everyone that they can submit their questions to all panelists with the Q&A tool at the bottom right-hand corner of the application. And the first question we have, is there a limitation in how many nodes a single Blueframe appliance can manage?
Yeah, of course, you asked one of the more difficult questions. It's both a difficult and simple answer for us. So when it comes to putting it on our SCL hardware, you're simply just limited to the hardware processing and memory usage. So just to give you kind of a general example is when it comes to supporting that SCL 3355, we would expect you, to be able to support anywhere between, 100 to, 400 to 500 devices on that hardware platform. Once you get into that virtual size, up at that corporate level, at that point, you should be able to go, 20 to 30, 40,000. It's really just limited to the number, to the hardware that you're putting the Blueframe platform on. But as just a reference, though, we have built the product so that it's still powerful enough on that SCL hardware where you can support, hundreds of devices at any given time.
All right, thank you very much. Another question we have, is there the ability to read settings from and write settings to IEDs through Blueframe?
Correct, yeah. So one of the feature sets, hopefully you're still seeing my screen here, is to be able to read the configuration data off of those devices. So here you can see on this demo, I've got this configuration monitoring archive. So if I was to go to, let's go back to that recloser. That's been one of our more prominent requests that we get. So here I can say, look at this 651R recloser. And I want to look at the settings that Blueframe has been collecting over the last 6 months. And so what the software here in this report is doing is we're showing two types of reports. One is the properties report. The property report, and it's probably tough to see over this WebEx, but what we're doing is we're simply baselining the firmware information that's on that relay. So you can see here it's got the firmware ID and the part number for that device. This is an internal relay, so the serial number is incorrect, but for, our 400 series relays that we do show, we show most of our relays now, we show the serial number as well. So that's the property, or think of that kind of as the nameplate data. But we also select and grab the full protection settings off of that device. So you can see in this report, I've also got a settings type. And so what the software does is it goes out, reads those settings off that relay, baselines them. And when I say reads them off, I mean they're in a format that QuickSet is able to work with. It brings the text files off of those devices and has those ready for a product like Accelerator QuickSet to work. And then you as a user can download those settings files and work with them through that Blueframe. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you. Another question from a participant, will this require a similar configuration as Teams to communicate with devices to retrieve data?
Yeah, good question. So we can't get around, it'll certainly be a little bit similar look and feel for the team software. We still have that concept of being able to define those resources, and those resources then have their own connection parameters per them. You will not be required to use the you're not required to use QuickSet on the same server as or near Blueframe. Those can run independently. At the same time, we've also made it so that you won't lose that data, that device manager. If you've built up a Teams server where you've already defined all your assets and your resources that you're collecting from, we have built up tools that lets you convert your connection directories over into Blueframe so you don't have to re-enter that information. Another couple of advantages that we have, or we feel like we have advantages on Blueframe, is one of the things that we support for our devices is what we call we support now multi-connection paths. And so the example we give often is you may be wanting to collect, say, SER data through your traditional telnet engineering access levels, but maybe when you do the settings, you want to do that through FTP, but associate that data with the same device. And so the Blueframe Resource Manager allows you, the user, to really define the one or more paths to collect that data for a single resource. So it gives you a little bit more flexibility when it comes to, just the different types of data you may be wanting to pull off for those relays. So for example, the RTAC has a really great REST API that works through HTTPS. But when you want to actually talk to a relay, say behind one of our security gateways, you would be wanting to use the SSH protocol. So it gives you that flexibility. One last thing I just want to say, for those users who do have the device manager, the Accelerator QuickSet's device manager in place with Team, that connection information, it can be brought over without having to re-enter that information. We do have tools for that.
Thank you. A few participants have also asked if the existing Team and Synchrowave licenses will transfer to the Blueframe environment.
Good question. So when it comes to what I showed earlier, that Synchrowave Event Express, that just simply comes along with DMA. For those users who have purchased Team in the last year or a couple of years, we do have some pretty aggressive discounting features there. So we don't feel like we want to have to say double dip as an example. But that's really tied to features that Team supports today. So for example, I'll give you a quick example is, let's say you've purchased the Team software in the last year and Team's focus is on event collection. We've now released the Blueframe DMA software, which also gives you the added feature of configuration monitoring, the settings monitoring from the relays. Working with your sales reps, what we would do is take a look at kind of when you've purchased that product and really focus in on the new features that you want, like configuration monitoring, and use that from more of a pricing perspective. For those of you who've had Team for maybe 4 or 5 years, that'll be a little bit more difficult discussion, but we certainly have some ways to make sure it's an easy transition between the older software and the new.
Thank you. One of our participants asks if there's a limit on event files that can be stored under DMA, because SEL relays have a limit on event files that can be stored with them. So they were curious about Blueframe.
Good question. So one of the things we've got when it comes to that DMA archive is, again, you are somewhat limited. So for example, if I double click on the system settings here with the screen, you'll notice that this Blueframe instance is running on one of our SEL 3355 computers. We certainly have a lot more storage than what your traditional relay, but the goal is the archive data will keep, and I'm going to get maybe this a little bit wrong on how long, but we keep substantially amount of data on the DMA server where we can keep, a year's worth of information, event data. But again, our goal for the software is to not be the final stopping ground. And so what we mean by that is, if you recall, I mentioned that API, that REST API. One of the things that we want you to be able to do is, after we've collected that information, the goal would be for you to then, or us to work with you to figure out a way to take those artifacts and publish that information to another location into kind of more of your traditional IT backup servers. That was a little bit long answer on my part, but I think I think this group's takeaway from that question as far as how much data can it do, we are certainly limited to the hard drive that's applicable to what you've purchased. But at the same time, we've put in a lot of hooks in the software so that you can move that data off of Blueframe and onto a more long storage, a system that's is ready, is more IT regulated when it comes to that storage, backups, and et cetera.
Thank you, David. Another question we have, will there be a Blueframe store for people to load and acquire new applications?
Yeah, I think the quick answer is stay tuned on that one, but absolutely, very similar to what you can do today with our SEL Compass product, where you can download from a client's application. Our expectations is that we will have, think of it as a Blueframe store on the SEL's website that you can access and download the various applications. Absolutely. And just as an FYI, right, like those applications can be downloaded and used, and then they are licensed post-installation. So we give you quite a bit of flexibility when it comes to installing, but at the same time, those applications are licensed. We wanted to make sure it was easy for those use cases where you might have to be replacing a unit and it takes some time to get all that paperwork done and the software would still work. But we do require licenses on those. I did see, just while I'm talking about that subject, I did see a question about getting demonstrations of that. We do have the ability to do that either through just simply purchasing the hardware. But if you also contact your sales representatives and get in contact with us here in R&D, we have some abilities to get you guys a demonstration or a pilot version of the software and get it in your hands pretty quick.
Excellent. Another question, a participant was wondering if Blueframe and DMA will be compatible with any third-party IEDs like GE relays.
Yeah, great question. It'd be a great roadmap slide that I probably should have created here. So one of the things you'll notice here in Blueframe, the screen that I'm still sharing, is we talk a lot about, just simply collecting the data, and I've got those resources here. We're always going to have a focus on those SEL products on this first creation, but we have built the architecture so that we will support other vendors' products with the Blueframe platform. And so, for example, Team software today supports GE relays using Modbus protocol. One of the feature sets that we will be doing later this year is supporting the MMS file transfer through the Blueframe DMA applications. And with the MMS protocol, at that point, we'll have a lot of flexibility to collect data from other vendors' products out in the field. I will say this, I'll at least open this up for everybody on the call, is to, don't hesitate though, if you have some products that don't fall into those two categories, don't hesitate to contact your local rep or local AE and have them reach out to us, because we do have some tool sets that we're building right now to not only collect settings through those protocols I mentioned, MMS and FTP, but we're also looking at ways to think of it as scrape web information off those relays or those other devices that might have settings available to them through, say, a web interface. So please reach out to us. We feel like we've got some tool sets in place to go beyond your traditional just SEL products.
Thank you. Another question, which event types are supported when collecting from SEL devices?
Right now, the way we do it is we are focused in on the compressed event files, the CEV, so the CHIS commands and the CEV files and the ComTrade files that are on the relay themselves. So when DMA goes to collect events, it's going to collect everything that relay supports, and that includes whatever the highest sampling rate is on that device. Once that data has been collected, we will at least at a minimum, we will also convert it up to ComTrade 2013, but we will keep all of those original files. So again, using that example of that disturbance monitoring one I had earlier with that 651R, is we collect all of that, anything that's on the relay we want to pull off. So CEV. Now for some of our legacy relays, or older relays, like our 200 series, that only support the EBE command, stay tuned on that one. We have yet to develop that part, but we know eventually we're going to have to support those relays. Now, one thing to be aware of is if you do have RTACs today, again, the RTAC can also help out and collect that information in the station, and then those can then be published up to the DMA platform. So here's an example of the 651R where I'm showing you all the event types that we collect for that single event. So again, we have the compressed, filtered, and unfiltered, the original 99 ComTrade format, and then the unfiltered, filtered ComTrade 2013 format.
All right. It looks like we have time for one last question, David. Is it possible to query a population of a specific relay model for a specific relay setting? Yeah, good question. So right now, when it comes to that configuration monitoring, what we're at least able to do is show you what's changed and unchanged. One of the things that we'll be working on through this year and probably into the first quarter of next year is we'll be taking those settings files and think of them as though we're parsing them out. And so not only would we be able to tell you that a settings protection settings have changed, the idea is then you could actually see which setting has changed, right? So maybe for example, a simple trip logic equation has changed. We would be able to show you down to that level. I think the quick way to say that, though, is right as of today, we can simply just let you know that something has changed, and then you can download those protection settings and do a comparison inside of QuickSet or simply just through looking at the text files. But give us a little bit of time, and hopefully by the end of this year, if not first part of next year, we will also be showing you the settings difference inside the report tool. So pretty cool. We do show you the differences when it comes to the firmware information, but the settings is going to take us just a little bit more development to complete that. Well, it looks like we got a lot of questions, so we appreciate that as well. Thank you. Yes, thank you, David. We've now reached the end of the webinar, and if your question was not answered live or via the Q&A tool, you'll receive an answer from our experts via email. If you'd like to learn more about this topic, you can also visit our website. We hope everyone enjoyed today's event, and we look forward to seeing all of you in future SEL webinars. Have a great day.